Okay, so today we're going to talk about network forensic analysis. And in particular, I'm going to pull out case studies from my own experiences. And the lesson I try to teach people is those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. Because a lot of these things are not really new, but they keep happening. So yours truly, blah, blah, blah. I've been there, done a lot of things, but I really am here to help, at least this week. So I went poking around and I did a filter on cyber news for the last 10 days. And it's interesting because this one in the bottom left corner, the CVS Healthcare, that's a big medical chain in California, which is where I'm from. This just happened on the 16th is when the story broke. In the previous session by Eddie, he actually talked a little bit about the script file that these people apparently used. So I hope nobody here, by the way, drives Volkswagens, because that story broke on June 11th. And if you play any EA games, got better check on that. Now, I did down here in the bottom right, I did put a couple of good news stories. I did do that. I was tired of all the bad news, so I decided to put some good news in there. Okay, so here's today's agenda. These are the things that we're going to look at. So assuming our time works, it'll be 6 case studies. And I'm going to start out with one that was also mentioned in the previous session. Nice coincidence there. We'll talk about the one that can get most people in a lot of trouble, universal plug and play. We'll then talk about one of my personal favorites, the Internet of Things. People say BYOD, bring your own device. I say buy your own destruction when it comes to Internet of Things. And then, of course, a topic that's heavy in the news, ransomware. I've got a PCAP sample of Drydex, which was the one that rampaged through Europe. Shut down Rotterdam in the Netherlands as well. We'll talk about botnets. Botnets are kind of old school, but I'm going to show you a few new wrinkles with these things. They're adapting like everything else is. And then my personal favorite, man-in-the-middle attacks. This one hit a company I used to work at, so I'll tell you guys the story on that. And then the one, application attacks. This is the one with the web-based things, especially web-based email. So I hope you'll find some interesting examples here. Okay, one of the questions that pops up when I teach Wireshark classes: what's the difference between troubleshooting and forensics? You can use the same PCAP, in fact, we often do, to do either one. It depends on what the customer is interested in. So here we see that when we're troubleshooting, we're primarily concerned with 2 things. How can I figure out what's the cause of my issue, and how do I locate and resolve it? Which is, to be honest, as a network engineer, that's what you're paid to do. In the forensic world, which I do a tremendous amount of work in, we kind of take over after these questions. And the kind of questions that I look for answers in PCAPs are, what kind of damage has been done? Can we identify the intruder and how they penetrated the existing security precautions? Did the intruder leave anything such as a new user accounts or perhaps some new type of malware? And the most important one, because forensic cases sometimes end up in the legal system, they end up in court. I've actually been in court 3 times as an expert witness for these. Do we have sufficient data to analyze and reproduce the attack? So those are all the different type of questions. So we're going to be looking at the forensic questions today. Now, one of the secrets to being effective in forensic analysis with tools like Wireshark, Zeek, and some of the other tools out there, Network Miner, and a few others. You have to know what things look like when they're normal before you can spot the abnormal behavior. So this ties in with one of my favorite things, baseline and reference files. These are samples of known good behavior. And I'm kind of a trace file junkie. Any PCAP that I get my hands on that the client will let me keep, I keep. And I archive them onto my servers over here, about half a meter over to my left. So I've got terabytes and terabytes of sample files. And it's a lot easier to analyze if you have a sample that you can put on one screen. Okay, this is how email works. You know, say SMTP. This is it working correctly. Then you put up the suspect file on the other screen and you compare the two. And you look for where things are different. That's what you look for. You look for where things are different. And that's where you focus your efforts. So where do I get them? There are a bunch of places. I've used all of these. The Wireshark wiki has a huge section of sample captures. Packet Life Net has a pretty good assortment. PCAPper Net. All of these have good assortments. And if you can't find what you're looking for here, just drop me a quick email down here. Phill.shade@gmail.com. And I can, if I have it, I'll give it to you. And if I don't, I know people I can ask to get some of these cool files. So now the question becomes, when you're looking at Wireshark, what do I look for? Well, you can see these marked in red. These are the key sections of Wireshark that I use extensively. And to be honest, this upper red mark should extend down to IO graph. I didn't realize I'd accidentally cut it off with the red box. So the kind of things I look for are things that don't make sense. Unusual communications, unusual ports and protocols, too many failed connections, suspicious inbound connections. And if your network is already compromised, look for those outbound connections. That could be command and control traffic, the phone home behavior of your own computers contacting the command and control servers. And the big one is DNS. There's a lot you can do with DNS. We teach a lot of this in our Wireshark 1 and our advanced Wiresharks classes. These are all things we teach our students what to look for. All right, so the first one, I kind of stuck it in here to get your attention. So let's take a look at it. It's going to be using UPnP, which I often call the unforeseen HTTP threat. This is the one that pretty much is enabled by default on everybody's computer. Now, if I took a poll and asked people, what about HTTP? I'm pretty sure just about everybody give me port 80, possibly 8080 if you're doing proxying, and maybe even 443 if you're doing TLS. But how many people would think of UDP port 1900? So I have a PCAP here. I didn't have time to put a file, a zip together for everybody to download. If you're interested in these PCAPs, just send me a quick email and I'll be happy to send them to you. So if you look here, UPnP uses a series of commands. They use a mix of modifieds, notifies, and 200 OKs. So here we see some of the notifies. Notice that it's your computer sending it out to a multicast address. And basically what it's doing is it's telling the world or the rest of the network, because if your network is properly configured, these things will not leak out onto the internet. That would be very bad. It's telling everybody, hey man, I support plug and play. I'm right here at this address. Here's my MAC address. tell everybody that I support plug and play. And that's the notify. Now, the M searches are me looking for other plug and play devices. And again, we're using that funny multicast address. We're using UDP port 1900. And we're using a protocol called SSDP, carried over HTTP. Now, I don't think I have any 200. Oh, I do have some 200 OKs. All right, so 200 OK is what we get when we successfully connect to another plug and play device. In this case, a media server. So most people don't know this exists. And if I told them their computers were leaking stuff all over the network, they'd laugh at me. Well, I'm sorry to say, here you go. We've tested this over and over again in class. Everybody's computer does it. Pretty much the only way you can stop this on your home networks or your company networks is to disable plug and play. Unfortunately, that's going to cause its own bunch of problems. So that's why I call it the unforeseen threat. People don't know it's there. If you don't know it's there, you can't take precautions. Like blocking it, leaving your network, put a rule in the firewall, but deny outbound UDP 1900. To be honest, that's actually how I stumbled onto this. I was tinkering with my firewall. I just got my hands on a hardware-based firewall box from Juniper, and I was setting up rules. And by default, I do like everybody else. I block everything and then open what's needed. And I kept getting these alerts saying, would you allow outbound 1900? And I'm like, what the heck is outbound UDP 1900? So being a PCAP guy, I fired up Wireshark, and this is where these captures came from. So I very quickly said, well, I'll allow the stuff within my network. It makes total sense, but I'm not allowing it to leave the network. My network is built around three layers of firewalls. So I run a total of 3 DMZs. And this is only allowed inside the innermost part of the network. So again, UDP 1900. So IoT. Now my question is, how many of you guys have at least one of these? Let's see if we get any responses. We got a whole bunch of people. So hopefully somebody is looking at this going, uh-oh. These are from all over the world. So I'm pretty sure most people have got at least a couple of these. Now, the cool little animated dude in there is medical IoT. This has been a big area, things like insulin pumps and heart pacemakers. There's been a lot of attention focused on medical technology lately because, to be honest, it's not terribly secure. As a matter of fact, I was teaching 2 years ago in the Netherlands. I was teaching a class when they announced 6 vulnerabilities in pacemakers in one particular model of pacemaker. And at lunchtime on that day, I had a very worried student come up to me and said, I have that pacemaker in my chest. What do I do? And I said, well, you get a hold of your doctor right away and you find out what they're going to do, if possible, to patch any of these vulnerabilities. Yep. Ethernet over power lines. The question here is the top left, Ethernet over power lines? Yes, or also watching television using the power lines to carry the signal. These were a pair of these that were brought in by a Dutch friend of mine to a class. And it was kind of interesting to play with them. So the medical story. And when we get into the botnets, I'm going to show you a piece of medical equipment I have that was on the Mirai Internet of Things hit list. Really got my attention when I was reading about it. And if it works, I've got a video of a guy that hacked his friend's Roomba, the little vacuum cleaner. And what he did is he set it up so every time it bumped into something, it gave a scream. And then they were all sitting there at the table when the Roomba crawled out of its little power module to start its evening's cleaning. And you hear this thing starting to scream these horrible blood-curdling screams as it's going around the house. The people did not find it very interesting, or very entertaining, rather. Very entertaining. They were impressed that the guy did it, but they didn't like what he had done. All right. So when we're talking about Internet of Things, you'll often hear another term. It's slowly falling out of use, but I still come across it. And that's SOHO, small office, home office. But Internet of Things are generally speaking, relatively low power, small form factors. A lot of them use the 2.4 gigahertz band, but they've also branched out into some other frequency ranges, including 900 megahertz. Now, unfortunately, this is not an IoT class, so I can't spend very much time on this. There is a class for IoT. If you're interested, talk to me offline and we'll do that. But I did pick out a couple of examples. And I recently, I do a lot of work with the American FBI. And I was in a briefing just recently about IoT. And these were the statistics they were quoting. You can see that the IoT, these are the publicly known vulnerabilities through the CVE program. And the chart only, unfortunately, goes up to 2019. I wasn't able to get a more recent one. But I mean, just look at the vulnerabilities, the way they're skyrocketing. This is getting scary. And I've been told that 2020 is even worse, especially with all of the COVID issue and people working at home. A lot of people are using Internet of Things connection devices and stuff. So one of my favorite things to play with in IoT is the Bluetooth frequency spectrum. In particular, the specification for Bluetooth, it now actually has its own IEEE specification, is 802.15. And Bluetooth just isn't for a headset or headphones anymore. Bluetooth is now, class 1s are designed to be used in industrial manufacturing facilities as networking equipment. Class 2 devices can also be used to interconnect and build home Bluetooth-based networks. I found that very interesting when I was first introduced to it. So Wireshark, of course, does a wonderful job with Bluetooth. It has several menus under the wireless menu, and the decodes are pretty good. They need a little bit of work in places, but that's being done. They're working on these. Now, Bluetooth can run encrypted, or it can run unencrypted. You can see an unencrypted example here. This was taken from a classroom. We were doing a forensics class. And to prove a point, one of the guys brought some Bluetooth stuff in. And there are Bluetooth capture adapters that interface with Wireshark quite nicely. And so we sat down to try several of them to see how well they captured. And this was the result. We did a simple file transfer from one side of the room to the other. But one that a lot of people have. How many of you folks have any of these products? Anybody got any of these? One of the Nokia wristbands? Because in Europe especially, they're not real popular here in the States. Somebody says I have those scales. Yep. Yeah, the scales by themselves collect data and report back. But the wristbands are also designed to interconnect. So here's an example of this is the wristband, the Fitbit connecting to the scale. And you can see they've got all kinds of stuff. Matter of fact, they've even slipped in a little recruiting blurb. This is becoming real popular in HTTP packets. They embed all sorts of interesting information. I've discovered these little Easter eggs in a number of HTTP packets in various products. The first one I discovered by accident was in a antivirus product. And I just was, whenever I get a new device or new software, I run it through its paces and I capture that, and that becomes my baseline for that device. And I was looking through, after I did an update on the antivirus, I was looking through the packets just to see what they look like and came across a very similar message. So let's take a look at this in Wireshark. Okay, so this one's an interesting one. This is a Philips Hue. Oops, wrong one. There we go. Hold on. So these are the scales, and you can see here, it's all in plain text. I was really surprised. I was really surprised. These are all data points that make sense to somebody, and they're going back to Nokia, which is something I didn't like for the privacy factor. But as we found out, I've done a lot of research into IoT devices, and it's really scary how many of them are reporting data back to the manufacturer. IoT, security and privacy disaster. Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. That's why I say buy your own destruction. But these things are everywhere. They're everywhere. Here in the States, it hasn't happened overseas, but Amazon has debuted something. I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but it's called Sidewalk, where your doorbell, your video doorbell, your Alexa, all of your little Amazon devices will share your internet Wi-Fi connection with people around. The theory is that they can network the entire neighborhood. And I can tell you, I'm not a big fan of that. Not a big fan at all. And you can opt out. The opt-out procedure is fairly simple to do if you know where to go to do it. So here in the States, it's been all over the news for about the last week, because it went live on Tuesday is when it went live. So if you're interested, look up Amazon Sidewalk. It may be coming to Europe. I don't know. You guys have a lot better privacy regulations in the European Union than we do here. So Bluebug, this is a classic one. This is just compromising the phone. It's not a new one. We warn people about this all the time, but it happens. It happens over and over and over again. Blue snarfing, I like this one. This is an American hacker. I was told originally he was a Dutch guy, but it turns out he's an American hacker. And he created, that's a blue sniper rifle. That is not a Star Wars blaster. But he managed to hack a mobile phone over the Bluetooth from 2 kilometers away by using a high gain antenna. He doesn't even need line of sight. And if you think about 2 kilometers around you, that's a lot of room for somebody to be tapping into you. And he was famous for, among other things, hacking Paris, what's her name? Paris Hilton, that's it. Yeah, he hacked her phone and had dumped all the pictures on a website. But this is a more recent one. Some guys were having fun. Teslas have an ability to update their software. These guys figured out a little exploit and drove through the parking lot. These are all new Teslas waiting to be shipped out to buyers. And basically they were turning on and off the headlights. They got in through a gate that was unguarded, and they had some fun before they got caught. Kind of a cool story, because they basically exploited the same thing that Tesla uses to do their updates. So I want to talk about another one that's really popular, Zigbee. Zigbee uses a variety of frequency bands and has different data rates. And again, it's made more for connectivity. I wouldn't try to do a file transfer over Zigbee. There are a lot better ways to do file transfers. So Zigbee's used to do a lot of things. For example, our friend, the Philips Hue light bulbs. That's the PCAP I have open here. And we were taking a look. We noticed that there were some notifies. And this was a test. We were just sitting at a friend's house in the Netherlands, a police friend of mine. And take a look at this stuff. Look at what these things are putting out there. And it's, again, it's in plain text. And it's communicating back to Nokia. And these are the Philips Hues, the adjustable light bulbs. Now here's a close-up of one. This is from a different trace. But what we had done was go ahead and, excuse me a moment, my wife's leaving for work. I love you. All right, so we had gone through and we found actual identifiable information in here. So we used an editing tool to change it so it would say dead beef. But it's really scary. And I mean, the light bulbs are everywhere. The Philips Hues are everywhere, man. So here's some of the information here. Philips Hue personal wireless lighting. There's the model number, the bridge ID, the serial number, the unique identifier. And again, it's all in plain text. Now, in Philips' defense, they do have encryption now available. It's a lightweight encryption, but it's enough to keep somebody like me from just reading your data. The problem with it is it's not enabled by default. The more I've researched a lot of these Internet of Things, I do find that a lot of them support some type of encryption or some type of security. But again, it's not on by default. So here's one. This was a hack that made the news about 2 years ago. You can't really see it very well, but some college researchers loaded up a drone and they're just flying the drone down the building and they're looking to see which light bulbs blink on and off. So interesting little test. And this one I came across. I was on a security feed and their Wi-Fi connected printers got hacked and started printing out some interesting messages. And again, most of the modern printers support WEP, WPA, whatever, but it's not enabled by default. Drydex. Ransomware. Definitely not how you want to start your day. Has anybody been hit with this one? Or ransomware in general? Okay. Well, this is an example of Drydex. This is a particularly nasty piece of malware. Like I said, it shut down the port of Rotterdam. It talked to the Ukrainians about Drydex. They love it because it destroyed their power grid. Okay, somebody's popping in a chat there. Yes, my father with Windows XP. Oh, yeah. And you would think that there wouldn't be, after all these years, a very big installed base of the more obsolete operating systems such as Windows XP, CE, and so forth. But within the industrial segment of the critical technologies, industrial control systems, SCADA arrays, ATM machines, restaurant point of sale terminals, a lot of that kind of stuff. People buy it once. They never bother to update it. They don't even think about updating. So this kind of stuff is alive and well. I mean, I think I still have one laptop with XP on it in my test stack. I got a whole stack of computers off to the side I use to test things on. And I think I may have an XP machine in there somewhere. But my God, I was staying in a hotel in Amsterdam. And I know a lot of the employees because I stay there a lot. And I was looking at their point of sale terminal for their restaurant. And I happened to be there in the morning for breakfast when they were starting it. And sure enough, there went the XP logo flashing by. And this was just before COVID. I was in Europe right up until the middle of March when they called all the Americans back home. And by the time I left the hotel, there were 15 guests and 17 staff people left in this huge hotel. And we were all trying to get flights home. In fact, that's where I caught COVID. I didn't catch it in Holland. I caught it when I came back to the States, passing through Chicago, because they still had everybody in these long lines. And that's where I caught COVID and then brought it home to my wife. All right. So this is from a couple years ago. We actually wrote this one up. We've obfuscated parts of it because I was doing a presentation about a year and a half ago with this example, and some rocket scientist typed in the whole URL and got infected. So it is still functional. Now, it was my computer that got zapped, but in interest of full disclosure, we knew about it, and I was the one that got picked. I lost the coin toss, basically. So it was my computer that went to this website. Now, it appears to be a Chinese alliance against Google, which is okay. That's their right. They have the right to do that. And all I did was load the web page. I didn't click on anything. I definitely didn't click on the Join Us banner down here. Now, we did two captures, one doing good old school TCP dump and another one doing Wireshark. And we changed the contrast a little bit. We were trying to tinker with what would make it show up the best. But here you can see that, among other things, here comes a lovely little executable being handed down to me as part of the HTML download. And again, the critical pieces are hidden to keep anybody from getting zapped. MD5EXEs, Chinese Army, backdoor malware. It opens up a backdoor in your computer. You're not really a bot, not yet, but your computer is open. Here is Drydex. This is the Drydex ransomware. And when you first look at it, it looks pretty harmless. But if you use the search function, you find the capital MZ, which means it's focused at Windows 6 system executable. So, I mean, it comes down gzip, so you're not going to see any cool text here like you would on some other malware. And they disguise the file name to boot. But this is how it does its damage. Now, I don't know how many of you know of this website, nomoreransom.org. If you encounter ransomware, this is a great place to start. This started out as a Dutch police organization, but now it's become global. Probably almost 100 different security companies and law enforcement agencies all over the world. And what they do, they deliberately they have test computers, they deliberately get them infected. Then they analyze the ransomware, and if they can figure out the key to unlock the computers, because most of these ransomwares don't generate a unique key for every computer. They have one key for everybody. And there's been several stories on the news about this. So what happens is if they figure out the key, they post the key on the website. So I've had several people I know get hit with ransomware, and out of 5 cases, I think I was able to decrypt 2 of them by using this web page to do a little bit of research. So hey, if you get zapped, it doesn't hurt to try. All right, I'm watching my time. We're getting there. The future of botnets. Everybody knows botnets. In the previous presentation there by Eddie, there was an incredibly good example of botnets. So what I want to talk about is my buddy, the Mirai botnet. Mirai means future. Now, the Mirai had an interesting background. And I got from a buddy at the FBI, I got some captures. For starters, for command and control, it used unencrypted telnet. I found that fascinating. They weren't very sophisticated in their command and control at all. But that's because it started out, a couple of college students wrote it up they hacked together. Their idea was to take IoT devices like the cameras in the dorms and all this other stuff, turn them into a botnet, and then they were going to turn the bots loose on a game you may have heard of called World of Warcraft. And the idea was they were going to make a whole lot of money inside the game. I talked to my wife. I don't play World of Warcraft. I play Lineage, which is a Korean game. But my wife does World of Warcraft, and she said, oh, yeah, there's people, they call it farming. They get these automated scripts running inside the game. They generate virtual things in the game. Then they sell them to people for real world money. Well, the 3 college guys that did this didn't do a very good job of constructing it. They basically hacked together code modules they picked up all over the internet. But you know what? For about a week, it worked. And then one of the code modules they hacked together had a back door in it that they didn't bother to research. And another hacker hacked in, took over their command and control server, took control of Mirai, and then proceeded to launch massive brute force attacks. And in October 2016, a little tiny company in the United States that most people had never heard of called Dyn was just DDoSed out of existence. The peak was about 280 gigabit per second coming from 10.5 million individual nodes. The average throughput was about 130 megabit. So it was ugly. Here is the architecture of Mirai. And all Mirai did here, if you look at this, this is just a chunk of the chart. The chart is about a gig. The spreadsheet is about a gig in size. All they did was identify your IoT devices. They knew the default login credentials and would try them. So you can see Samsung IP cameras, all security counters, SMC routers, Toshiba cameras, Xerox printers, and so on and so on and so on. And this is just a tiny snapshot. Remember, they got almost 11 million devices by doing this, because how many people think to change all of their passwords when they buy something? Hopefully everybody in this presentation does, but I'm willing to bet your father, your mother, your brother, your uncle, or whatever, it doesn't even occur to them. So here's some of that command and control I was showing you. And here's my personal Mirai story. Buried deep in that table was a category of a couple 100,000 different pieces of medical equipment. Now, my lungs are pretty damaged. Before I even got COVID, my lungs were messed up already. I'd been in several fires and breathed too much smoke and damaged my lungs. So I have a breathing machine that helps me breathe at night. Well, brand new, and I had just gotten this thing. This is my machine. I was actually in Europe. I think I was in Germany. I was either in Germany or Finland. I don't remember. when the alert came out. And I just photographed it. That's my machine. But when I got it, there was this little Wi-Fi module right here on the back of it. You notice you don't see it there in the picture from my hotel room. That's me taking it off, because I asked the guy that was showing me how to use the machine, what this module was for. And he said, oh, that's so we can collect data. Oh, here's somebody with the same machine. Ugh, yeah. I hope nobody here has a Philips CPAP machine. There was a big article here in the States. There is a big recall on the Philips CPAP machines because the chemical that they use inside the machine as an insulator to cut down the noise causes cancer. So a lot of people are worried. But anyway, what the guy said was, says, oh, your machine will send data back to us. And this is a canned screenshot from the website. This isn't my data. And I said, great. Is it encrypted? And he said, I don't know. And I said, is this one way? Is it just reporting data? And he said, oh, no. The doctor can connect to your machine and adjust it. And I was like, piece of equipment keeping me alive while I sleep. Unencrypted. And that means people can control it. Okay, can I take the module off? And he said, well, yeah. So you see me taking it off in that picture. And he said, but now you're going to have to bring in, there's a little SD card that's hidden behind this module. He says, well, you have to bring that into the doctor every time. And I'm like, cool, I can do that. There's no way I'm going to be relying on a piece of equipment that some idiot kid down the street can hack into. So that's my story. Now, I was lucky. My machine did not get infected by Mirai, but it is in the table of devices that could be brute forced. All right, so here's what Mirai does. A couple of different variations of SYN floods. These are all different Mirai attacks that I picked up on, just looking at them in Wireshark. Basically your generic TCP SYN floods, DDoSes. So, turns out that Dyn, D-Y-N, that little company, is responsible for hosting one of the root server clusters for DNS. When they got bombarded with that massive denial of service attack, it took down the root servers. They had to shut them down, which took out the internet in a good portion of of North America, not just the United States, but it stretched up into Canada and down into Mexico. So life was not good. Now, I know some of you probably looked at the dates on that Mirai trace file and you're saying, that's a long time ago. From a friend at NetScout, as of December of 2020, here are Mirai nodes that are still being repurposed. This really caught my eye. I was really surprised. Oh, Brickerbot. God, I haven't heard that name in a while. Yes, it is not. No, it didn't work. But now, here's something interesting. Mirai was just the first. These are all other botnets. And the thing about Mirai, remember, was it was the first IoT-based botnet. But take a look at these. There's now, once one guy figures out something cool, everybody else copies it. It's just the way it is. So here are a bunch of other IoT-based botnets. There's a Twitter botnet, an Android-based botnet. And before you iPhone guys think, yeah, you can't get me, there's also some Android or Apple iPhones. I forgot to put them on the chart. That was my mistake. But there would be two iPhone specific botnets on here as well. Attacking from within. This is probably the easiest thing in the world to prevent. It's ancient as all get out. Man-in-the-middle attacks started about 2 days after Ethernet was created. Back on February 3rd, 1980, was when the 802.3 specification, which is Ethernet, that's how they got the 802. It's February 3rd of 1980. So a couple days after Ethernet was created, somebody figured out how to do a man-in-the-middle attack. It was really easy. And they became so common that everybody knew how to recognize them on the Ethernet and how to ignore them or mitigate them almost instantly, that they fell out of use. They stopped happening. But along came a really cool technology called Wi-Fi. And I tell you what, I dare you to invent a less secure technology than Wi-Fi. So this one happened at a software company, and it cost them a lot of money, actually. So basically, they were working on a key project. A week prior, the competitor trademarked his primary and secondary names. They were forced to pull the product, redo everything, and it cost them about $2 million to fix it. So man in the middle is very straightforward. Wi-Fi is like built for man in the middle. So here are just a few different man in the middle toys that you can pick up. Some of you probably recognize Pineapple Tetras, or the Wi-Fi Pineapple small one, and the Tetras. This was at a recent DEF CON that my evil twin went to, and just grabbed a couple of pictures of a table. So the scene of the crime, courtesy of Google Street View. Basically what happened was, once we realized something had happened in the Wi-Fi, we took a Wi-Fi scanner and we went around to each of the documented access points as we found them on the scanner, and we shut them off. By the time we were done with the access points being disabled, we should have had no more signals. We found a signal. With the directional antenna, we were able to track the signal to the conference room, the executive conference room, on the second floor. Now, this is the original projector. And this is the original connection. In fact, that's my old laptop connecting to the cables to project to the screen. Well, there was a new projector there that was Wi-Fi enabled. And guess what? Doesn't support encryption. The access point was what's called a dual home or dual radio access point. That means it has 2 receivers and 2 transmitters. Was on a tree branch connected to a very large battery pack. And basically what happened was they turned the encryption off on their laptops to connect to the cool projector. They were actually connecting to the rogue access point, which was connecting to the projector, which meant the access point was getting a copy of everything. And here are the packets. In this case, Intel Core 5E is the attacker. The projector is Cisco D0, and the client was Intel E3. And the tip-off to these is the directed ARP requests. ARP requests are normally sent to a broadcast domain with one exception. This isn't those exceptions. You can see here he's trying to trick 2 different devices. So we constructed some color rules and some quick filters to identify funny, suspicious ARPs. And that would be your filter string. And here are some of them hidden in the trace. You can see they're sprinkled throughout the trace. The idea is you poison the ARP cache, and eventually you trick the guy into believing you're who you say you are. So we went through the investigation. We found all of this. And of course, nobody had any record of the projector being purchased. No one would admit to purchasing it. So I'm censoring my answer when I discovered it. Okay. Oh, one more. Cool. Okay, this is 2 different files. We're going to look at email, a little bit of phishing, and we're going to look at a ZBot, one designed to steal your money. So let's real quick get through these phishing emails. One of my favorite Dilbert cartoons. Just so you think, you've probably heard about SolarWinds. You may have heard about the Office 365 and the Google G Suite. These are some recent examples of application and emails. Most of these infected infections happen from email. These are all ones that popped into my inbox. I have several different inboxes with different names that I use for work. And not one of these is real. Not one of these is real, but several of them look very legitimate. The PayPal one looks pretty legitimate. And this one looks really legitimate. It looks like a subpoena for court. And I did look up the case number right here. I went online, looked up the case number. It's in California District Court. I live in California. And everything about it is legitimate except for one thing. By our Constitution, you have to be served in person or through your proxy, your lawyer, a subpoena. They cannot email you a subpoena. But boy, it looked real. Here you go. So this is an email. It's using an old trick. So let me go ahead and reassemble it real quick. Follow stream. You can see here that it appears to be an audio file. Well, it's actually an executable. It's a piece of malware. It's a piece of malware being sent through the email. Horror of horrors. This was how a lot of those SolarWind attacks and how most malware, to be honest, still spreads the same old-fashioned way. People click on something, either a web page, like that previous example of that Chinese website, or on an email link. And every company out there does testing and people still fall for it. Case in point, Google. Their top executives got an email. And it had a PDF, corporate information, Google management. This is what's called a spearfish. It was targeted to a particular group. It put Trojan spyware on there. Now, this one I could not get a cost factor from. But the Chinese, when they did an analysis of it, they were targeting the Gmail records of human rights activists, a number of which have disappeared. So you can think whatever you want to think. This one has a cost that is not dollars and cents. I threw that one in. Nobody's safe. Not even my buddy Sint. He shouldn't use the username of Santa and ho 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 password. Here's what happened with the Google guys. There's that MD5 again, that one I showed you from that web page. This thing is everywhere. This MD5EXE, the Chinese update it all the time. Here's a few fake login screens. One of them's Gmail. A couple more for banks. Some breakdown of how it works. And then we've got our ZBot. But before I open up the ZBot trace, I want to show you guys something. This one popped into my inbox today, this morning at about 3 o'clock in the morning. And Dignity Health is a huge hospital chain in the United States, and they want me to set up my account. And it says, action needed, your Dignity Health records. And they even offer a Spanish version of it, which is kind of cool. The problem is, neither my wife or I belong to Dignity Health. I'm ex-US Navy, so I get my medical care from the military. I apologize. There you go. You guys should see it now. So this one was pretty good. And when I do, when I hover over the links, they look pretty accurate. But I did a little bit of research on it, and it takes you to a malware site. So I thought that one was kind of cool. It doesn't have any of the usual issues with bad spelling or anything else. It's very well crafted. And I would imagine that somebody that uses the Dignity Health hospital chain could fall prey to that one quite easily. All right, so this is a trace that came from a bank. The guy that captured the trace was a friend of mine. The bank is Windows-based. And I've got some quick filters, HTTP GET requests. There's 2. which that ain't good. That isn't good right there. EXE. Zbots have been around for quite a while. The reason they're still on the top 10 list is they steal financial information. In particular, Christina, oh God, oh, I can never pronounce her name. I suck at Russian. I can read it, but I can't pronounce it. Anyway, they grabbed, using 99-cent transactions in the space of 30 minutes, $12.5 million. $3 million from the US and $9.5 million from the UK banks. And the banks are able to follow the money trail. They're real good at that. But when your money trail goes through Venezuela, Iraq, and a couple of other friendly countries and ends up in Russia, good luck getting your 99 cents back. So the key was that RibbonTar. The RibbonTar, and you would say to yourself, well, Windows machines don't know tar files. Well, unfortunately, this was the first click that we saw that caused our attention, Hong Kong. Now, remember, this is a bank, and a lot of banks do business in Hong Kong. Well, this bank didn't. It was a small bank. So we looked up ribbon.tar, and it takes you to the Cisco Talus research site, which is a fantastic site. And it walks you through the complete breakdown of this thing. Ribbon.tar is just one of the ZBot terms. There are about 30. This one was responsible for a couple $1 million before they cut it off. So it downloads the tar, and embedded in this is a self-extractor. Once it is downloaded, it will self-extract. You then send a burst of information back to the server, and in this case, the PipiSkin HK. And then that software tells you to go ahead and download the actual executable malware, at which point they own that computer and they are now inside your bank. So I poked around. I'd heard of this. I'd heard that I could find copies of the ZBot software to custom make it. And I was offered, apparently I'm a trusted member of what I won't say, but apparently I was. And for $700, he would sell me the source code. And no, there is no dummies book for ZBots. That was something my friend drafted up just for funny. Final example, International Space Station. Should be pretty safe. It's got a 200-mile air gap. Well, Stuxnet got on it through a USB stick. So even in space, you aren't safe. If you're not paying attention to what's happening, I have no idea the backstory of this picture, but, well, you're just wasting your time. You're in a flood. Bailing out your car isn't going to work. So now time for questions. Anybody got any questions? No open questions. You can pop them in the chat. Either one. We'll watch a shark do the Macarena. Oh, there's a couple of them. Cool. How did Stuxnet end up in the space station? I thought it hit Iran's. Stuxnet crawled everywhere. It was designed to target one particular programmable logic array that controlled centrifuges. And yes, it did target Iran's nuclear facilities, but it spread all over the world. The thing is, as it would infect a device, it would scan the device, send out a burst of about 300 bytes, which I have a feeling is a way of telling the command and control server, sorry, not this network. And then it would go dormant. It wouldn't do anything. You wouldn't even know you had it if you didn't see that 300 byte bursts. So yeah, it was everywhere. And it got onto the International Space Station through a USB stick. I actually have, let's see, yes. I will cover the name of the manufacturer, but I have a USB stick here. It's kind of hard to see. Right there it is. This has Stuxnet on it. It has a copy of Stuxnet. Kind of interesting. Any certifications of worth? I'm not sure what you mean. I will send me an email. Yeah, there you go. This one gets the quickest answers, and so forth. So, where do I go from here? There's in Europe, Asia, Middle East, there's a training consortium of five different companies that do Wireshark training. These are the different classes they offer. If you're interested, send us a question and we can talk to you.